In 1918, the German army was broken. The Treaty of Versailles didn't just defeat them, it dismantled them. No tanks, no air force, a navy reduced to toy boats, an army capped at 100,000 men, a paper tiger. Yet less than 20 years later, this broken nation would launch the most terrifying military machine the world had ever seen. How? History books tell you it was political will, but the truth is darker. It was the greatest Ponzi scheme in history. It was a military built on debt, lies, and a secret rearmament that started long before Hitler even took power. This is not just the story of battles. This is the story of the German perspective, from the drug-fueled highs of the Blitzkrieg to the apocalyptic lows of the bunker. Welcome to the Hidden World War II. January 1933, the Nazis take power. Their promise, make Germany strong again, but the treasury is empty. To build a war machine, you need money. Billions. Enter the Mefo Bill, a masterclass in financial fraud. They created a phantom company that issued IOUs to pay arms manufacturers. The entire German recovery was a bubble. If the war didn't start, the German economy would have collapsed by 1940. War wasn't a choice. It was the only way to avoid bankruptcy. And while diplomats smiled in the West, the German army was already practicing. The hidden truth. The Luftwaffe was born in Russia. Years before the war, German pilots tested illegal planes deep inside the Soviet Union, far from the eyes of international inspectors. They were forging the sword in the dark. September 1st, 1939, the invasion of Poland. The world sees newsreels of steel columns and hears the scream of the Stuka dive bombers. But look closer at the footage. Look at the background. The Wehrmacht wasn't a futuristic machine, it was a museum. For every tank in Poland, there were dozens of horses. The Lightning War was fought largely on foot, but the Germans had something the Poles didn't: radio. While Polish commanders used flags, every German panzer had a radio. They didn't have more tanks, they just coordinated them better. The Gleiwitz incident, a fake attack staged by the SS, gave the excuse. The radios gave the coordination, and Poland fell in weeks. 1940, France. The strongest army in Europe collapsed in 6 weeks. How did the Germans drive their tanks through the impassable Ardennes forest without stopping for 3 days? The secret weapon wasn't just the panzer. It was Pervitin, crystal meth. The German army was high. Millions of doses were distributed to troops to kill fear and the need for sleep. The Blitzkrieg was a chemically induced rush. French generals were analyzing yesterday's battlefield while German commanders, fueled by speed, were already cutting their phone lines 50 miles behind them. In Berlin, the relief turned into ecstasy. Hitler was no longer just a politician. He was seen as a military messiah. The hubris was now limitless. But the drug wore off. Summer 1940, Operation Sea Lion, the plan to invade Britain. For the first time, the German machine stalled. Hermann Göring promised his Luftwaffe would sweep the Royal Air Force from the sky. But over the English Channel, they learned a hard lesson. Propaganda doesn't win air battles. The British had radar. They saw the Germans coming. The German bombers were slow, their escorts ran out of fuel, and their pilots were dying in droves. The invasion was canceled. It was the first crack in the armor. But the German High Command ignored it. They looked east. June 22nd, 1941. The fatal mistake. Hitler ordered the invasion of the Soviet Union. He believed the USSR was a rotting structure that would collapse with one kick. 3 million men. The largest invasion force in history. The first weeks were a slaughter. The Red Army collapsed. Millions of prisoners were taken. It looked like another Blitzkrieg. But Russia is not France. The distances were impossible. The roads turned to dust, then to mud. Engines choked. And then a ghost appeared on the battlefield. The T-34 tank. German shells simply bounced off its sloped armor. For the first time, German soldiers felt inferior. And then came the cold. Not just winter, Russian winter. Temperatures dropped to -40. Oil froze in the engines. Bolts snapped like glass. The invincible army was freezing to death in summer uniforms because the high command was so arrogant they hadn't even ordered winter coats. They thought the war would be over by October. They were wrong. 1942. Stalingrad. This wasn't a battle. It was a meat grinder. The Sixth Army, the pride of the Wehrmacht, was encircled. Hitler forbade them from breaking out. Goering promised supplies from the air, a lie that cost thousands of lives. Inside the Kessel, starvation set in. Discipline crumbled. Men fought over pieces of bread. When Field Marshal Paulus surrendered in January 1943, it wasn't just an army that was lost. The myth of invincibility died in the ruins of Stalingrad. News traveled back to Germany not through official channels, but through whispers. Stalingrad became a word for death. Back home, the mask fell off. Joseph Goebbels stood in the Sportpalast and asked, "Do you want total war?" The crowd cheered, but fear lay beneath the surface. Albert Speer took over the economy. He performed a miracle of production. Despite the bombings, German factories produced more tanks in 1944 than ever before. But the cost? Slavery. Millions of forced laborers from occupied territories kept the machine running. The German economy was now a vampire, feeding on the blood of Europe to sustain its war. The war came home. The Allied bomber fleets turned night into day. Hamburg, Cologne, Dresden. The blitz that Germany had inflicted on London returned 100-fold. Life became a routine of sirens and cellars. Propaganda spoke of wonder weapons that would turn the tide, the V-2 rockets, the jet fighters. But for the average citizen, the reality was digging loved ones out of the rubble. Faith in the Führer began to rot, replaced by a singular instinct: survival. By 1944, the Wehrmacht was bleeding out. The D-Day landings in the West, the Soviet steamroller in the East. Internally, the pressure cooker exploded. Operation Valkyrie, the attempt by German officers to kill Hitler, showed that even the army knew the war was lost. The regime responded with fury. Thousands were executed. On the front lines, the retreat was endless. Soldiers wrote letters home that sounded like last wills. The master race was now running for its life. 1945. The apocalypse. The Third Reich, which was supposed to last 1,000 years, had shrunk to a few city blocks in Berlin. The defense of the capital fell to the Volkssturm, old men and teenage boys on bicycles armed with Panzerfausts. It was a tragic, senseless sacrifice. While Hitler moved imaginary armies on maps in his bunker, disconnected from reality, the city above him turned into hell on earth. Suicides skyrocketed, fanaticism mixed with fatalism. When the guns finally fell silent on May 8th, there was no glory, just silence. The German perspective of World War II is a journey from intoxication to annihilation. It began with a lie about national greatness and ended with a nation in ruins. The efficient, mechanized Wehrmacht was largely a myth. The clean war was a lie, and the genius leadership was a gambling addiction that cost millions of lives. Germany learned the hardest lesson of all. When you trade your conscience for a dream of power, you wake up in a nightmare. This was the hidden World War II. If you want to see more declassified history and myths debunked, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell. See you in the next one.